can you do to save these darn herbs? I mean, the thing is not all herbs mind the heat. In fact, obviously, most herbs love being in warm weather because you can't grow them as well during the winter. Part of that, in fact, is because of the fact that you have to have them doing, of course, the whole, oh, we are not having enough light. So once you don't have enough light, then that gives you the big trouble of running into the fact that they can't grow because they can't get their darn chlorophyll and all those other fun things going. But anyways, with the heat, you'll find the problem is mainly with like a lot of the greener herbs. Let's just go into the list of them here first. So herbs that really don't like the heat at all. Cilantro, of course, is one. Chives, parsley, salad burnet, sorrel, and chevrolet are some of the biggest ones. They say basil can do well in the heat, but I do find that basil still has trouble with the heat, with drying up much faster than some of the other woodier herbs. Lemongrass is still in that same middle range. The fennel I still have problems with the heat, even though they say it can do just fine in the heat. Tarragon, same way. I find that it tends to want to turn a little bit faster when it's in the heat. And these are all the ones now that are on the list that say, oh, they're fine with heat. Mint can kind of really go either way. Yeah, mint can actually handle both. Oregano can handle both a little bit better. It still has a ceiling though. When you're talking mint, oregano, you're talking probably 34 degrees Celsius into the 90s is its ceiling. Rosemary and lavender, on the other hand, those guys can handle most anything, especially rosemary. I would say out of this list, rosemary is probably the toughest customer out of all of them. That rosemary is a beast when it comes to dealing with anything along these lines, because it is, I think, one of the it's the slowest to grow out of the woody herbs, I think. I think it definitely takes a long time to grow as far as some of the other woody herbs. But really, once it gets going, it's a monster. Hello, Husky and Wolf Dog. Good to see you. Yeah, it's part of the reason it's my constant background is rosemary. I love it. I actually started a new rosemary this year, and it's doing rather well in my garden. And I have an older one that's regrowing as well. But yeah, when it comes to the heat, just don't worry about your rosemary. It's going to do just fine, other than normal watering and such. But to finish off this list real quick, dill is another one that I think is a little bit on the fence, because I have noticed my dill. I had one outside and the heat wave hit and it went in a hurry, as did my basil that was outside. I should have taken some photos of it to post here on the live stream or some video, because my dill just went from like happy to sad in like one day. Nothing flat. It went in a hurry being out there. That was a small potted one though, so it didn't have much backup, and I was busy and didn't have a chance to water it that day. And that's all it took. One day not watering, it was gone. So that just goes to show the herbs, there's a term for it. It's called Turgor Pressure. Okay, Tugor, Turgor Pressure. It's when the leaves have water vapor that transpires up into the stems, and this is when you have the green herbs like your basil and your dill and such that don't have a woody woody root structure to keep it up straight. It's the water pressure that keeps them up straight. So that's why you see when they start wilting and the stems start bending over, they don't have any more turgor pressure, because there's no more moisture coming up from the soil to help them out, right? Yeah, Husky and Wolf Dog says their mint's doing great. Lots of flowers in it. They do attract a lot of flies, though. Yep, mints. There's a couple herbs that are funny that way. That they like to say, oh, they totally repel lots of different things. But at the end of the day, all herbs still attract certain flies. I still have white fly problems. I still have other little gnats that love getting on my herbs still. So no matter what herb you have that repels different things. There's other ones that they still love attacking the herbs. So, so last ones on the list are Borage and Bay Laurel. And Bay Laurel, it's essentially a tree that you get the herbs from. So yeah, it makes sense that one's a very hardy one. It doesn't have much trouble with it. But this list, once again, goes to the woody versus the green herbs. The woody herbs are the hardier herbs. The thyme, the rosemary, the lavender, the bay laurel, of course, could be in a tree, are all the ones that have that woody structure to the, can definitely handle going through the heat waves a little bit better. That's not to say that if you don't water them more constantly, that they're not going to have trouble. And watering is your number one problem. Heat, cold, always, that is going to give you trouble. But especially with the heat, I will have to go from a watering schedule of maybe watering 3 or 4 days a week, to or even like three to 4 days between waterings, to every day for sure watering those herbs. And believe me, if you probably know, if you've got your own herbs, if you don't water them daily and you're going through that hot heat wave that's over, 30 to 35 degrees Celsius or 80 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's getting up to those temperatures, you will notice those herbs starting to go down in a hurry if they don't get watered daily. And what you can do with the watering is do kind of what the people do a lot with, especially with their hanging plants, is you just give them a full soaking, and you actually just soak all the soil completely, kind of like you would do with an orchid a lot of times, that you would just soak it and then you run off the drainage of the water so it doesn't actually sit in the water and then cause root rot and things like that. So, but that's why you do it with the hanging plants. Anything that you have in a hanging planter, that you can just soak the soil, that it automatically is going to drain off. But if you have your herbs in a planter that has a catch tray underneath it, then you definitely are going to need to do something in order to make sure that you're not having trouble with those darn herbs sitting in the water and then getting root rot. Because even the mint here is going to have trouble if you do it that way. So, yeah, just be careful with that. Oh, yeah. Speaking of water, I need some water myself. But yeah, let's move on down the list here. What's else? Oh, hey, Brainstorm Maker, it's good to see ya. Took a break and saw you were live. Can't stay long, but hey, just glad you're here. Good to have you here. Yeah, same with us if we don't get water. Exactly, that's why I just had to drink. But I have a list of things also to talk about as far as if your herbs are having trouble. I'm going to go back to it here. Some things that you can do to help them out. Obviously, if you have containers in them all, that's much easier to deal with in that sense, that you can overwater the soil and help that to protect them, and then just get the runoff and get rid of that. If it's super hot, that runoff itself will evaporate in a hurry, but... obviously, if they're in ground, or if you have them in a large planter that you can't do that with per se, then one of your best bets is to get like a shade cloth. So I have some photos of that as well. Shade cloths, here you go. These are all just some different varieties of some shade cloths you can do, and essentially you could do this with anything that's this kind of muslin or see-through material that can. It still isn't necessarily trapping in the heat, because obviously if you're having it in a greenhouse effect, then it's kind of defeating the part of the purpose. The whole idea is to stop some of that direct sun and to cool them off a bit. So unless you're just straight putting them into an area away from the sun, so if you have containers and you just put them in a more shaded area, that's one thing you can do. Just get them in the shade, and that's obviously an easy solution. But if you can't do that, then the shade cloth is a good way to go. That you can just put any type of shade cloth up, help to create a lower temperature around the herbs, so they're not just being inundated by direct sun, non-stop heat all day long. Another thing when it comes to the watering, really quick, is to make sure that you're doing it when the herbs are not in the direct sunlight, right? So if it's really hot out and you are dealing with all of that sun out, there's it's another name for the condition, I'm forgetting what it is, but if you water in the sun, and especially if you get that water on the leaves, which is something they say you can do to help keep the heat protected, is to spray your herbs down, but you really can't do that in the direct sun, because those little water droplets can kind of create little magnifying glasses to actually bring the heat into the plant even more, and will cause burnage and burn your leaves. So you can't do it during the middle of the day, or you can only do it early in the morning or later at night once the sun started to set and you no longer have the direct sun on the herbs, okay? So you have to be careful when you're doing that extra watering, if you're spraying them down in any way, or if you're doing something to, help keep them cooler involving water. Yeah, you just can't do that in the sun. I generally will do it in the morning. I have my herbs lined up in such a place that they don't have direct sun at all for the first couple hours in the morning. And in fact, I like, even just with the fence that I have, with the sun coming in from the one direction, I have the fence here and the herbs on the other side of the fence. I guess on this side, if the sun's coming this way. If the sun's coming, pointing on the screen is tough. So if I have a fence, this is easier. Have a fence here, and I have my herbs here, and the sun's coming this direction, then I'm blocking that sun from these herbs here, which is where I have them in the morning. And the same thing with, I have them against the side of the house in that same format to help protect them from that immediate sun. So same thing. I protect them from that sun as much as possible for as long as possible. Because while the herbs love lots of sun and can get 8 to 12 hours of sun, no problem, and love that, the direct sun can cause problems with them, and especially when it starts adding that extra heat. Another thing you can do is actually start pruning them, right? The more you prune them, that's part of what that is doing actually. Is, for one, like with cilantro, which doesn't love the heat, it helps prevent it from bolting faster, which is cilantro's default application once it starts getting too hot or getting too much sun. Cilantro, coriander is always going to immediately be like, yes, bolt, and just end your cycle. Which, on one hand, if you have a couple of corianders or cilantros going like I do at all times, that's perfectly fine. Just, cycle one out, use it up, and go to another one. That's another thing you can do, is if you're not harvesting them completely, though you just need to keep pruning them, right? So what that obviously does is it makes the energy condense into a smaller area, so you don't have all the leaves that are having to take this extra energy and the extra water. The more you cut it back, the more it's like, okay, I'm just dealing with less surface area that I have to help. So yeah, pruning is another easy way to do it. Yeah, I am drying out. Like I said, it's so hot around here that you just got to be careful with that. But what else can you do? Let me go to the comments first before we do anything else. I think it's better giving water in the evening or early morning. Well, Husky and Wolfdog, I already kind of answered that one. I didn't even see the question. They asked, is it better to water in the evening or the morning? And really, a lot of people say the evening because after the watering, they're not going to deal with any sun. I think that's still perfectly fine in the morning, as long as, yes, you are avoiding that water coming into contact with the sun, right? So if you can water early enough that you are not dealing with that water dealing with the direct sun, especially if you've gotten it on the leaves, then that's the most important thing, right? Hello, our treasured home. Good to see you. Welcome. So yeah, I think that's the main thing, is dealing with that. Another thing, obviously, that you can deal with, depending on your location and what kind of heat you have, is if you have too much you don't have enough humidity or not, because some places will get super hot and still have lots of humidity. And that keeps a lot of moisture in the air, which, of course, if you have the humidity, is fantastic for the herbs. They love that. So that'll help them keep happier. Obviously, a simple solution is you bring them indoors from the outside the heat. But if you have lots of humidity, that is actually a good thing. Just put them in an area that's not as affected by the direct sun and just let them soak up some of that humidity. In addition, that you're in good shape. But if you don't have the humidity, if you're in one of those places, then yeah, the more you can do to help keep that them having some kind of source of water in there, the better it's going to be, right? Some people say to create a little bit of a humidifier for them, which you can do with stones. Do this more with orchids than I do with herbs, because orchids definitely need to have at least a 50% level of humidity. You know, usually a little bit on the higher end, they're happier with. But if you start getting below 50%, especially below 35%, the orchids hate that. So the same kind of holds true with the herbs. The more you can keep a little bit of a humidity in the air, the more that's going to keep them happy, even if they aren't getting the direct watering as much, right? So humidity is definitely helpful. And of course, the type of container, as always, is very important too, right? So if you have them all in, say like this, in your little pots. So if you have them all like in the bottom row here in these little pots like this, then you have to make sure those pots all have drainage in them, and good drainage, because some just have like a little singular hole in the bottom. And if that's the case, that's definitely not as good as having multiple holes in the bottom. And with that, you can actually do it without a drip tray, but I have like my big old rosemary one is just on the ground by itself without a drip tray, so I can water it and don't have to worry about the water collecting on it. So hello, painting with squirrels, welcome. Yes, hydrating myself. Very important during a live stream. So yes, with that, yeah, there's the type of pot that they have, and knowing that with certain type of pots, they are more likely to become dehydrated faster, right? So if you have, say, a terracotta pot compared to a plastic pot, that's going to make a big difference as to how fast they dehydrate. The plastic pots will actually keep the moisture in a little bit longer than the terracotta ones, but the terracotta ones are better in the fact that it creates more circulation of air, which is good. You just have to know that fact, that if you have a terracotta pot compared to a plastic pot, or even just a full-on pottery pot that has less airflow in it, that you have to take that into account as to how much moisture is getting into the plant and staying in the plant, especially if it's hot, right? Oh, that's cool. Welcome. It's hello, good to see Blind Neil as well, but glad a friend of yours sent you over, painting with squirrels. We're talking about how to keep your herbs happy during this hot summer. Excuse me. And in case you missed it, one of the first things you're always going to notice is the wilting, right? Wilting is the first and obvious sign that if you see your herbs wilting, that means, okay, yes, they are probably too dry, right? There's a difference between wilting and, like, say, turning yellow. Turning yellow is probably you overwatering it. That or possibly not getting enough nitrogen, or not enough direct sunlight. But it's definitely not from having too much heat and sun. Let me see here. What's another one that you can be confused with it here? If your herbs are just drooping a little bit and seem to fall over their own weight, that's not necessarily a heat thing. That's probably too much fertilizer, or not having enough drainage again, or not pruning them enough, that you just need to keep cutting them back so that your plants are happy with it. So yeah, those are just some other possibilities of things that can happen when you've got those herbs having trouble. Um, but if the herbs in particular are wilting, that's one of your major sign that you are dealing with some possible heat damage. The other things can cause wilting as well, though. Obviously, having a pot that's too small and you may need to transport it up into a bigger pot, and so the soil is just draining too quickly. So if you have a little, you want to keep your herbs generally. Most herbs like a good draining soil, a much more loamier soil that has that drainage in it. But if you're getting too much, then that means that the water is just not going into the plant itself. So you got to be careful with that. But most of the time, too much temperature, too much sun, and just wilting from the overall heat is what causes that stems and leaves wilting away. Okay. Wah. Painting with Squirrels says had struggled getting mint going and has 2 tiny plants that I think are going to take. Mint is one of those ones that if you have to, or if you can, start it from a cutting and go from there, because that's faster than going from seed. Mint, once it gets going, is a beast and will just go and go and go. They're monsters. They will take over an entire yard if you let them. You have to keep them in containers or have to keep them away somehow from your other plants, because it is definitely an invasive species that will take over a yard. But in order to get it to start is a bit tough. Starting them from seeds is not that easy. Another thing you can do is you can prep the seeds. So you take them and you put them in a little wet cloth, and you can just keep that like in a fridge until the seeds actually start popping open and getting a little sprout going. And once that happens, then you can plant them. So that way you know the seeds have actually started taking off, and then you would just plant them from there. And they don't have to get too big once you start doing that. I mean, just enough. But it's something that's definitely a nice way to start them off, that you know you can get them going. And you can do that with any herb, I think. But it's a good way to go for it. But yeah, otherwise I'd say try propagating as well, because mint can be propagated. And I'm a big fan of hydroponic propagation. So what you do is you take a cutting, say like you have a little over a foot of a plant from here, where it's all just the herb from here. Cut it back to about halfway, maybe here, and then you take off the bottom leaves from this part, and then you set that in some water until that bottom part gets like a good amount of roots. So if it's this tall, say if the plant's this tall, then you're probably going to want to see like that much of root action going. So get a good inch and a half of roots going before you try and plant them in the ground, and do it then. So that's a good way to do is water propagation, and get them started pretty easily. I do that with basil all the time, especially. Start the seeds in own pots. Yeah, I mean, obviously people do that as well with seeds. Is you have those little big old squares where they each have their own little tiny thing, and you just put little seeds in each of them to get them going, and do it that way. So yeah, you can just start in a cup of water is all you have to do. Water propagation, it's real easy. Generally with water propagation, it can be done in a clear cup or in a cup that actually isn't clear. I tend to lean more towards clear cups to, keep the sun getting even into the roots, just because they're just getting started. But you don't have to, because like obviously, again, you want to be careful about if you have it in a glass cup that you're doing it in, then you just keep it away from the window, because the window is always going to create some refraction, and the glass itself can cause refraction, and then you can just burn the roots, and boom, you can kill the plant. So yeah, if you have a clear cup, just be careful that it's not in direct sunlight. Okay? Yeah. So Husky and Wolf Dog says they have a high wooden planter that mint is growing through the side of its seams. Yep. There you go. That's mint for you. I just have mine all in containers, and none of them are wooden. So I still have just all my mints in pots. But what I haven't done yet, and I keep contemplating doing is the big old allotment garden next door has some mint just kind of naturally growing out of the side of it, where it's like on the edge of the fence. There's some mint growing out, and I keep going like I should just take a cutting of that and use it. So I haven't. Every time I do that, I keep forgetting to go grab my scissors. And I just need to go back over there and go like, yeah, grab some of that mint, bring it over, because I want some of that mint too. It's a different species from the one I have, so that'd be awesome to have. Oh yeah, I am so hot. Woohoo! But no, that's most of the basic tricks. One more time, just so you remember them. Cooler weather herbs that like a little more shade: chevrolet, sorrel, salad burnet, parsley, chives, and cilantro. Especially cilantro. And I do find my chives wilt rather quickly when it comes to the heat. And my parsley downstairs, I had one outside and one downstairs and one in my front room. And all those parsleys, especially the one downstairs, is just looking rather horrible right now because of the extra heat in the sun. So yeah, definitely that parsley does not like that. What I've just been doing has been, because of this part of the season, I'm just using it up. I have more I can plant later, and I will. But yeah, when it gets to that point, especially if it's in a small pot, I just say use it up. That's what it's there for, and then just replant a new one. And especially when it's like this and it's over hot, it's easier to start one from seed anyways. And because the plants will love the extra temperature and the extra sun, and you can just restart them. But yeah, the cilantro especially, once it starts bolting, you can't stop that bolting. You might as well just use it up. It's just not going to survive otherwise. Yes. Oh yes, why thank you. Blind Neil saying yes. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Thank you. Woohoo. Yeah, I've been working a little bit more towards doing more perennials myself, our treasured home. And that's definitely something I've been working on. And I need to hit the rest of the perennial list. Because I already have my rosemary, I've got my thyme, I've got my lavender now. And I've got some oregano. And I've got a couple others that are perennials. The mint, obviously. My marjoram, my hyssop. So I have a ton of perennials, but I'm just like kind of wanting to go down the whole major list of ones that I can definitely overwinter. There are basils you can overwinter, but I do find that basil is not that hard to grow over here in the UK especially. So I don't mind just restarting it. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, I do love doing overwintering with herbs because it's just so fun to keep them going despite the conditions not loving them, you know? Any other questions or thoughts before I get heading on down the road here and moving on to other pastures? So y'all know, I'm probably going to do one more live stream before I post another video this month, because coming off of my show that I was doing, I have just been recovering from that for one thing, and I've written a couple scripts. I just haven't shot them yet, so I still need to shoot my history of salt in the UK script. And I still have to shoot my benefits of thyme tea, because I covered thyme mythology and thyme history a while back, but I never actually covered the benefits of thyme, especially the benefits of thyme tea. So I wanted to make sure I went back and caught that before I went into some other ones. One of which was someone, was it your treasured home? But it was someone just mentioned to me doing honeysuckle, and I figured I might hit that one pretty soon. Just because, like, yeah, that sounds like a good one. But I have a list of ones on my phone here that I need to actually cover. If I can find my list in an expeditious manner. Things like echinacea, astragalus, elderberry, moringa are all ones that I was told I need to cover. Black garlic was something I wanted to cover. A very particular type of garlic. But elderwood is something I said ages ago I would cover on the channel. Like when I first started the channel, I mentioned elderwood, but never actually covered it because I've gone more specifically into the herbs and plants lately. And but yeah, those are the main ones. I really wanted to talk echinacea because people know echinacea for colds, but echinacea is good for lots of other things as well. And I wanted to go a bit more into those details. Elderberry is a little bit more popular right now, so it was another one that I wanted to cover along those lines. Astragalus is another one that someone from the channel wanted me to cover. So it's like, yeah, if you do have something in particular that you know is trending right now, let me know about it. That or something that you are just particularly interested in, because that's what matters. You guys are the ones watching the channel, so I definitely want to cover what you guys want to cover, and one way or another, it's going to be relevant to the channel if it's, you know, one of those herbs or flowers that, you know, I can do. Yeah. Elderberries can be poisonous, but you can eat them. Yeah. It is one of those ones that are like that. There are a couple ones like that. I mean, sage can be poisonous to people, and there are certain varieties of sage that is poisonous. But the common sage, Salvia officinalis, is not toxic, except for the fact that its main ingredient, if you have it in excess, can be toxic to some people. So yeah, that's true for a lot of herbs in that sense. But yeah, elderflower, elderberries, both are ones that you can have to a certain extent. Yeah, no problem with that. Husky and Wolf Dog says elderflower lemonade and mint. Ooh, that sounds pretty good. Yeah. Painting with Squirrels has some good sage going. Nice. Oh, and burdock, huh? Yeah, burdock is one it's a good companion plant that everybody loves doing. And I do need to cover burdock as well. I know a couple of people from some other channels that I follow have covered, they grow burdock a lot. And I've been, every time I see it, I'm like going, yeah, burdock, it's like the ultimate companion plant. And I really should cover that one because it's so good to have in a garden. For some reason, it encourages growth in so many other herbs and plants and flowers. Burdock, it's like, to me, I think it is the ultimate. Dan, you could probably help me with this too, but burdock, would you guys say that burdock is the #1 companion herb plant to have in a garden? That, because I think there's lots of ones that grow better with different herbs or plants in your garden. But from every time I come around to it, people say, "Oh, what can you grow with this? Burdock, burdock, burdock." It seems to be one out of the herbs that you can always grow with other things that helps encourage growth with other types of plants as well as itself. Whereas mint, you don't want to plant with other people. Rosemary, you probably don't want to plant with others as well because it's so hard to grow in itself until it gets moving really well. But burdock, man, it's a friend to all. So yeah, it's definitely one that I should cover soon. Yeah, my gosh, I have covered everything I wanted to cover. So unless you guys have more questions, I guess I am going to head on down the road. Even though Dan Permaculture Food Forest just showed up. Hi, Dan. I know he's got a great channel too. If you haven't seen it yet, go check out Dan. And lots of the other people on here today have great channels. Of course, I know from ages ago, Husky and Wolf Dog and Our Treasure to Home, they both have channels. They're both great. On here earlier was Brainstorm Makers. They're a couple of great people. That you should check their stuff out too. But otherwise, yeah, that is taking care of your herbs in the heat. And I'm going to go take care of myself out of this heat as well now, I guess. So y'all have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. We will catch you on the next round. Bye.